Hello, and welcome to A Theory of Everything. Last time we talked about the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, the terrarium we're stuck in, and what that means for us. Today, I want to talk about something more fundamental and a little more relevant to your life. What is information? What is learning? And how do we find truth? This is going to be the foundation for everything that comes after. Consciousness, spirituality, politics, art. And if you don't understand how information works, how we learn, and how we know what's true, well, the rest of this series is going to be confusing as hell. So with that note, let's dig in. But first, Outer Wilds spoiler time. Don't worry, it's shorter this time. If you haven't played it, please do. It is one of the best video games of all time, and seriously, we are going pretty deep into spoiler territory. So, there, play the damn game. Alright, let's start with our most basic question. What is information? Well, kinda everything, but not exclusively. Let me explain. Mass and energy make up existence. Everything that can exist is either mass or energy. But everything in existence, everything that exists, contains information. I'm using information as broadly as you can here. Physical properties, historical context, relational meaning, even its existence in itself is information. So again, when I say information, I mean any fact that can exist in reference to a thing. They're structured patterns in reality that can be observed. And here's the trick. As we learn, we don't just find new information, we create new categories to hold it. Each discovery expands what we're even able to look for. Take a book, for example. You can get really nerdy about it. Its chemical composition, cellulose fibers, and lignin, and calcium carbonate in the paper. Or you could just look at the obvious stuff, the color, its shape, its wear and individual characteristics, the words obviously. Or you can get conceptual with it. You can look at its history, both as an object and as a concept. Where it's been, who's read it, but also who wrote it, what influenced them, what this book influenced afterward, its role in the flow of ideas, and every other concept that can be applied to an object. It's a lot. Your body is made of roughly 7 octillion-ish atoms arranged in super intricate, complex patterns, and that's a whole lot of information right there. Your genetic code, information. Anything that makes you as a human being unique in every single way is information. In a way, there's infinite information. Information about information is itself information. Even the information that nothing is there is information, which is why we separate information into categories. Otherwise, it becomes really overwhelming. You've probably heard of known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. That's another way of categorizing information. What we know, what we know we don't know, what we don't know we know, and what we don't even know we're missing. Each category requires different approaches. Known unknowns, you can research those. Unknown unknowns, you don't even know to look for them. This is why learning isn't just accumulation, it's also discovering what categories of information even exist, which is why there is such a bias for people who know nothing about a topic to think they know everything about a topic. Now here's the thing. Most of all that information I just brought into our minds, it's fucking useless a lot of the time. Sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's really important, but a lot of the time, You don't need to know the chemical composition of your desk to use it. You don't need to know the precise wavelength of light hitting your retina in order to see. And your brain knows this. The reason optical illusions work is because your brain filters out the majority of information it's exposed to, or it doesn't process it in the first place because it's a waste of time. It keeps what it thinks matters, and it throws away the rest. But what it doesn't ignore, it uses to learn. Which brings us to our next question. What is learning? How does your brain organize the information it keeps? Here's where I'm going to turn to Outer Wilds. In Outer Wilds, your ship has a computer. When you discover something new, a rumor, a location, any piece of the puzzle, it gets logged, and as you gather more information, patterns emerge. Connections form. The computer organizes everything into a web of knowledge. This is how learning works. There's a hierarchy to it. At the bottom, you have facts, raw observations, individual data points. This can be anything from the number of planets or their names to there's an observatory on the Attlerock. Just isolated facts. Above that, ideas, connections between facts, multiple pieces of information combining into something bigger. The observatory tracks planetary positions, but there's one thing the Nomai were trying to track that it couldn't detect. Now you're onto something bigger. Higher still, concepts. Broader understandings built from multiple ideas. The Nomai were searching for something called the Eye of the Universe, and it's older than the universe itself. Now you're starting to understand context. And on top of that are frameworks, complete systems for understanding a topic, or as complete as you can know. One example in Outer Wilds is the entire story of the Nomai. Why they came here, what they were trying to do, what they built, what happened to them, and who they were as people. Facts, ideas, concepts, frameworks. That is another way in which complexity builds. And that's what your brain is hopefully doing right now as you listen to me yap. But here's where it gets a little annoying. Frameworks can become concepts in even bigger frameworks. The Nomai story is a framework, yes, but zoom out. The Nomai story is just one part of Outer Wilds. The game also includes the Hearthians, the stranger species, the solar system's physics, the time loop, the eye, each planet. So that Nomai framework, which felt complete a second ago, is now just a concept in this bigger framework, which is Outer Wilds itself. And you can keep going. Outer Wilds is one game in the open world game genre. That genre is one concept in how humans tell stories about discovery and meaning making in an indifferent cosmos. It's frameworks all the way up or down depending on where you're standing. And this brings us to another question. How do we learn? How do we process all that? Well, that's it for part 1 of this now 3-part series on information. What is information? I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry it took so long. The next part's probably going to take just as long, realistically. And on that note, I hope your day improves, as will mine, and as will this channel. Thank you, and have a good one.